Waiters, waitresses of Reddit, what's the most awkward first date you had to witness firsthand? I was a bartender at a local place that was somewhat close to the university, but far enough away that it was a hidden gem. We used to get first dates all the time, most of them were Tinder-esque. I remember one time specifically, this guy comes in and sits down at a table alone, and kept checking his watch. A watch? I wander over, greet him, and ask what he'd like to start off with to drink. I dunno, I'm meeting someone, is it rude to have a drink already before they get here? I smiled, asked if he was waiting for a date, he said yes, and I suggested a beer to sip on instead of a mixed drink. It might calm his nerves a bit, but won't get him inebriated too quickly so he could enjoy his date. He agreed, apologized profusely for bothering me, which, he hadn't bothered me at all, and continued to wait. After about 20 minutes of him waiting and him checking his watch every 5, I wandered over again and asked if he'd like to look at a food menu, perhaps munch on something while he waited. He declined, and glanced at his watch again. I made a comment about his watch and how I appreciated his use of analog technology, and he laughed nervously and said he didn't want to pull out or use his phone during his date, because he didn't want to seem disingenuous. How cute. Another 30 minutes pass, and my high-strung hopeful was still alone. I asked if he'd changed his mind about some food, and he merely shook his head, defeated. I'll just finish my beer and go, I'm sorry I wasted one of your tables. On his last swig of beer, a cute-looking girl walked in, eyeing the room, obviously looking for someone. Chelsea. Over here. He started to stand, grin from ear to ear. The entrance was near my drink well, which I had just happened to be standing in. This night was particularly quiet, and the acoustics allow me to hear chitter-chatter in the entryway, curved ceilings. I look over to the girl after seeing my hopeful's eyes light up, and she had a disgusted look of "damn it" in her face. She rolled her eyes and made contact with mine, sighed, and said, "Are you fucking kidding me with this guy?" screwed on her fake smile, and immediately sat down, avoiding a half-hug attempt by my hopeful. The entire date felt forced. Every time I went to check on them, she was ordering another drink, and he was doing his best to try and pull conversation from this girl, who had her face in her phone the entire time. About an hour later, I watched the girl get up with her purse, announce that she had to use the restroom, and wandered away towards the restrooms. I immediately went over to my hopeful to ask how his date was going. "I don't think she likes me," he trailed off. I gave him a pat on the shoulder, and said it looked to me like he was doing everything right. He smiled, thanked me, and I went back to my bar. The girl never came back. He footed her tab. $90 worth of drinks, his 2 beers were $8. He continued to come back as a regular, and I became his wing woman. I eventually set up Mr. Hopeful with Ms. Lonely Heart. They're still together. Edit, spelling. I'd like to hear the story of Mr. Hopeful and Ms. Lonely Heart. At my place we had the opposite. A young in shape really handsome dude from Spain would be in 3 to 4 times a week with a new older woman. The women would be buying him everything and basically swooning over him. He'd always walk up to pay with a little smirk while she would be paying for everything. He did this for years. Saw a guy hitting on a girl and buying her drinks for the entire night, then realizing she was a hooker. The guy starts talking about how nice it is in the modern day that you can just date without labels. Woman, in suspiciously chipper voice, responds that sometimes labels are really helpful in defining the boundaries of the relationship. Man, very upbeat, replies that sometimes it's nice just to enjoy your time with someone without having to define anything. It was so hard to listen to. But mad respect to both of them for making their intentions known up front, and in such an amicable way. How'd the date end? I sadly put a waiter through the awkwardness. I mean, it was kinda hilarious. I went on a date with another dude. Except I didn't know it was a date. The entire thing was funny, I just thought he wanted to get wings and beers after our basketball game. Anyways, the thing is the waiter came over right at the point where we started joking about it and heard some weird negotiation like, him, "You're saying you won't suck my dick even if I pay for your meal?" and me replying, in jest, "Well, maybe, if I can order the steak." I used to work at a sushi restaurant in Anchorage, and there was a girl who would come about once every few weeks with a different guy. Every single time, she ordered a hyodubap, which is like a rice salad sashimi bowl, and it was giant. I've only ever seen a handful of people ever finish the entire thing in one sitting. She would finish the whole thing with chopsticks and always ask for a spoon towards the end. It was always fun watching the guys look stunned when she finished. One day she came with this dude that ordered what she did, and when they both finished the bowl, they ordered another and split it. Wish they had ended up together, but she came back with a different guy a couple weeks later. Edit, she never paid lol. Wasn't the waiter just a nearby patron with good hearing? They were just about done with dinner when she gets a call, tells the caller she isn't busy and makes plans to spend the night with another guy, all while lover boy sat across from her with his jaw on the floor. I used to work at a Mexican restaurant, and one year when I was working on Valentine's I was subject to one of the weirdest first dates ever. A couple walks in, she is dressed to the nines, like she's ready to hit up a club. He is dressed more casually, in jeans and a button-down. Our hostess seats them, and when I go to greet them the man announces that this is their very first date. The lady looks less than impressed and gives a small smile, more like a grimace. They order drinks, and as I'm watching their table you can tell that the date is not going well. The guy is talking animatedly and the girl is glancing around like she'd rather be anywhere else. I head over to take their order and it's clear that I've interrupted something. The guy looks a little embarrassed and sad and the girl looks pissed off. He orders his meal and she flippantly orders something, seafood enchiladas, without really looking at the menu. She tosses her menu in my direction and sucks down the rest of her drink. Okay then. I deliver their food and go back behind the counter to continue rolling silverware and watching my tables. They dig in and the man seems to be enjoying his food, his date looks disgusted and is flicking bits of her dinner around the table floor. I walk over to check in and see if she maybe wants to order something else. I get to the table to ask how everything is and she gets up, screams that her food is disgusting, and goes off about how shitty this date was. She started yelling at him about how he should have ordered for her, how dare he take her to such a low-class place, she was so done with this, blah blah blah. She shoves her plate away, gets up, and storms out of the restaurant. The dude is mortified. I tell him I'll be right back with the bill and would he like his food boxed up? This fucking guy shakes his head, pulls her plate towards him, and says nope, he's fine to continue eating the meals he's paid for. He stayed for the duration of his meal. I never did find out what happened to the lady. We talked about that incident for weeks after. Not a first date, but a guy decided to propose to a stripper from Scores, high-end joint in NYC. She was stunning. Also in fine dining, he gets on one knee and pops the question and she goes out loud, "Are you fucking kidding me?" He got up and asked for the check. Worked at a pub connected to a brewery in college. Dude comes in with a stunning woman, I mean she's absolutely gorgeous. Whole time they're sitting at the end of the bar, and you can hear the guy talking about how he has a room for them next door at the hotel in downtown. So they decide to go to the brewery next door, gonna pull a little dine and dash. They got over there and didn't realize we are on the same system, so he orders a couple of beers, and the bartender on the brewery side asks if he wants to add it to his tab. He looks over confused and says, "What tab? I've never been here." She prints off the restaurant bill plus his brewery tab, it's like $80 or so. He just blankly stares at the poor bartender, flies off the handle. The girl he was with ended up paying for it. They walked across the street into the hotel, he has already invited her up, she stalls until her Uber gets there and then just tipped out. Kinda funny, kinda awkward, but that's what you get for dine and dash. Not a first date, but very awkward. Guy comes in with an escort and drops a good amount of money on booze at the bar. Then she leaves a few hours later, and he informs us that his wife is on her way to meet him for dinner and tips us an extra $200 to keep our mouths shut. Keeping it classy. Lady comes in to get a table, says she's expecting a man and gives us a brief description. He shows up about 10 minutes later and she starts saying she knew it, he looks very surprised and scared. I took a drink order and when I get back they are gone. The hostess fills me in that in my absence they had a heated but civil exchange, the man was married to the lady's cousin, also the lady was married. Apparently they had been texting for a while after meeting via Craigslist personals. I'm assuming the married but looking section. Don't know if they hooked up in the end or just called the whole thing off. I had these two people that were there on a first date. After the appetizers this poor man got the shits and was going back and forth to the bathroom all night. There was only a few other people in the restaurant at the time so it was noticeable and they were chuckling every time he got up. I honestly felt so bad for the guy. I used to wait tables at a steakhouse. This guy used to come every weekend, sometimes alone, sometimes with a lady. He skipped a few weeks and came back on a Sunday with a new lady. I get his table and when I see him I greet him, "Hey, long time no see." The death stare from the woman almost killed us both. They didn't speak for the rest of the dinner. And I didn't get a good tip that day. We had a regular that would have drinks and appetizers with his girlfriend. She'd leave and his wife and kids would meet him for dinner. Not a waiter but a girl I met on a dating app a couple years back told me this guy who she also met on said dating app set a date at this weird unknown ghetto bar in our town, and while the place seemed bad, the guy seemed cool, so she ended up going. She gets there early and sits down at the table. Guy isn't there yet. She notices there are 2 other girls, also alone and on their phone, sitting separately. As the time goes on, more and more single girls start walking in and sitting alone. At this point, the guy is late by 15 minutes. After 30 minutes, she stands up and asks one of the girls, "Sorry, are you waiting for Alex?" The girl surprisingly says yeah. Another one must have heard the conversation because she stood up and said, "Hey, I'm also waiting for Alex." Turns out Alex had managed to invite 12 girls at the same bar at the same time, clearly as a prank. They ended up all sitting together and chatting and having drinks. Apparently it was a great night and most of them kept in touch. 3 of them even went on vacation together in Europe. I'll always wonder if Alex, or whatever his real name was there to notice it all, or knows how his prank ended up turning. Edit, words, can't write for shit. Edit 2, everyone saying Alex was the bar owner or the bartender, it most probably wasn't. This was an ancient old-timers bar where the owner, who's also the bartender, probably didn't own a cell phone, and where they had car and motorcycle meetups every summer. There was nothing hip about it. Maybe Alex was one of the girls, and she just wanted some girlfriends. The date I saw started off great. I was playing in a band at a small club. There were about 30 people in the club. A couple who had been sitting close together in a corner booth disappeared together into one of the bathrooms. In between songs, when it was quiet in the club, the bartender yells, "They better not be in there fucking on my sink." The whole place turns and stares at the bathroom door, and as we're staring, the couple emerges, smiling at first. Then they look around, see everybody staring at them, and their faces turn a deep color of shame. They quickly paid their bill and left. That is fucking hilarious. I worked as a barista at a coffee shop with a dish-washing sink that brought you face to face with whoever was sitting at the coffee bar across from you. For some reason, so many people chose this spot for their first dates, so I would have to wash dishes and pretend I wasn't literally on the date with them. One time a person I knew was on their first date with someone and chose that cursed seat across for the dish-washing sink. Because we knew each other, we chatted a little bit and then, as if a partition raised between us, they began their date, but I still had dishes to do. So fucking uncomfortable. There was guy who would use the place I worked at as his go-to. Every time it's a different girl and every time it ends with angry, he'd butter them up and brag about himself and talks about how he is such a gentleman for treating them to classy place, and as gratitude they should let him fuck them. Every time the date walks away and we have to deal with a horny asshole who tries to get either pity sex or pity dessert from the female staff.